Oh, yep. Got a screen share.
Okay.
Oh, this is fantastic. Okay. Oh, Olivia, okay, I'm sorry. Today is Thursday, September 28th, and we have our third, third art chatter for Mr. Austin's 251 class. It is 2023, the fall, and we've got Olivia Ra- 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 uh,
That's the answer.
Racionzer.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
Olivia Racionzer, our Welsh puppeteer. Is that correct?
Yes.
That I've actually been bragging and going around and telling people that we're chatting with a Welsh puppeteer, and and we have a very small rural town. I guess about 30 minutes away from where we live, and it's called Welsh. So I've been throwing people off. So it's been so okay. Olivia's a puppeteer. She also sews, and that's what led us to you in the first place. Uh,
Yeah.
and I hadn't told them this yet, but I liked the way you phrased it. I reached out to her in the sewing aspect and said, would you talk with the class? And she said, does it have to be art or does it have to be? I don't remember what you said, but you're like, this isn't my main thing. Like the sewing thing's extra. I do the dark, 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 dark matter, dark is
Oh, dark materials. Yeah, yeah.
materials. Yes. So,
Yes.
anywho, this is Hallie. Why don't you go ahead and introduce everyone? Yeah.
Okay. That's Hallie. I'm Alani. That's Asha. That's Allie. Right there. That's Kierce. That's Mr. Austin that you're just talking to. And that's Miss Petaway.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. So, Olivia, I'm just gonna let's just roll with it. You've got something prepared, and you sound lovely, and we just want to see your pretty stuff, artwork.
Cool. Okay. Um, so I can't tell. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'll make it full screen, but I won't be able to see you. So if you have any questions, interrupt me so I know that you're there, basically.
Deal.
Um, so um, so as you mentioned, you'd initially reached out for my sewn art, but because it's not my full-time job, I kind of thought there wasn't really much in it to talk about, let's say. So I kind of mentioned that I'd worked on his dark materials, and that's my, let's call it like full-time career, and art is on the side. So I thought to almost go through my creative career from high school to show how I got to where I am. And the things don't really link up together, but I guess I'm quite lucky to be able to say that my career choice is very creative and I get to do art almost every day. Um, so I thought I'd kind of start from high school, where I feel like my sewing art kind of developed from. So when I was 16, I got really into photography and uh, self portraiture, and I did that series there on the left, where I took self portraits. And then I printed them and then transferred them onto fabric and sewn. I did a lot of sewing onto them, so a lot of geometric shapes and kind of. I really liked red thread on black and white as almost to show kind of like blood flowing, but to show it on the outside. And then on the right is an installation I did again, I think when I was 17. And I just quite enjoy that how much thread and string I used to use, and I can definitely tell that that's still with me today, like almost 10 years, 11 years later. So that's kind of where it started, where I realized that I really enjoyed art and art could be a possible career choice. So the two things I'll be talking about are quite different. So I thought I'd start with the sewing because it's slightly more compact, and then I'll go into start materials that is a whole separate world and um, requires a bit more explanation. But I I've always enjoyed collecting old photos. Um, I started at 15, I think, and I used to go to flea markets and antique shops, and I'd spend hours going through boxes of old photos. I also love finding like photo albums and kind of having a whole series where you could tell. Oh, sorry, Ava, get out. Where you could see almost like the family evolve, the kids growing up, and you could really tell what their life was like, and you could see the story behind the photos. So I basically hoarded photos for quite a long time until COVID hit. And I realized I needed something to almost occupy myself. So I decided to go back to the photos I'd been collecting and incorporate the sewing with it. So this is when my high school art comes into place. I was looking through my old photos and I'd realized that's something that I'd touched upon without really realizing. And I just started experimenting with sewing onto the photos. So at the beginning, I wasn't very confident and I was quite scared of ruining the photos because every single photo is unique. And because then it was a lot more expensive to take photos and they all had to be printed, there were many more limitations. So it felt quite strange and odd to almost like puncture these photos. But then I had to keep reminding myself that somehow they ended up in the markets and antique shops. So there must have been a reason, or maybe the entire family had passed, so there's no one to take them on, or maybe the photos weren't great memories, so people decided to let go of them. So there would have been a reason why they ended up there. And I started off really like simply, let's say. I used to take a photo, for example, the man on the left with a jacket, and I used to stitch along the clotheslines. So I wouldn't go outside the box, let's say. I would follow lines that were already there and almost kind of add a 3D-ness and texture to the clothing. I think I got quite bored quite quickly because I realized it wasn't adding as much as I thought it was. It was kind of just a repetition of what you could already see. And at which point I started actually adding much more to it. As you can see, I went quite abstract with these three. These are other examples. So I learnt a couple of different types of stitching.
Olivia,
Yes.
we have a question.
Cool. I will come back to the screen. Yes.
On your last three pieces that you showed on the slideshow,
Yes.
why you use that specific pattern on each of them, like the kind of looks like a rock star, like lightning symbol.
On the previous one, this one.
Yes.
It's really hard to tell. The initial idea, or what was kind of going through my head, was this idea of like shattering, so almost like fragmenting the photos, or trying to almost like break it apart. And that's that's the kind of shape that I imagined would almost do that or would have a big enough impact. I also was kind of inspired by brush strokes, very loosely. So I did a few tests on paper of what brush strokes could look like, and I tried to kind of recreate it on the photos. And then in a weird way, when I get quite obsessive about a style. So I end up doing like a selection of series. So, for example, the next slide on the left, when I learned how to do French knots, I tried to find photos where I thought they would fit in to the image, so that I could practice the French knots and also add some kind of texture. And the one on the left specifically was done. So the previous three were trying to emulate paint strokes. This current one on the left was more of a paint splatter. So I splattered paint over some tracing paper, and then I laid the tracing paper over the photo and punctured all the holes where the paint had splattered. So I think all four of them are kind of trying to emulate other ways of making art, but using thread on old photos. Because I feel like I always have to try and change it up a bit to not have almost like a stagnant condition. And it's the same with the middle one here. It was kind of like starting to, rather than just sew, I cut the two sections out and swap them over, and see how it feels like to cut into them as well as just sewing. And something I really enjoy kind of exploring with all of these is like looking at the relationships and realizing that the photos aren't portraying maybe what's actually going on. So they're just a moment in time on what could be a completely different story. So it's almost playing with that and seeing how I could reinterpret it. And that's kind of the same with every single photo. It's kind of breathing life into them and seeing if they can have a new life and almost a different meaning. But obviously, we're never going to know what's going on and who people were. Although it's really nice sometimes because some of them postcards, so you get to see the back of them, and you can read parts of what's going on in their lives in a specific moment. So that's always really nice. And on the side, I've also started doing like experimenting. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Experimenting with beads as well. So this one's got sequins. And yeah, just trying to add any kind of texture and 3D element to it. And then I've also started doing collage as well. Any of the photos, so the size of the photos I usually collect are this.
Yeah. Somebody else. Yeah. Yeah. We recall that one from the Instagram.
So yeah, this is the like let's say the regular standard size. Anything smaller is quite tricky to sew onto. These have got a nice thickness to them, so they feel really strong. Anything smaller ends up being quite brittle, so I end up making tiny collages out of them. So they're quite a lot smaller.
I was gonna ask, what's the yellow? Is that just more paper?
Yeah, so that's watercolor paper. Yeah. See, I've got bigger versions. I have so many, so disorganized.
Oh, where are you, Olivia? Are you in your studio or your home?
Yes, it's my office studio space. It's quite empty at the minute, but this is usually where I do my art.
Yes.
Ava, come on. And then whenever I get kind of stuck and can't do the sewing, or haven't got any inspiration for that, I usually end up trying other methods. So still using photos, but painting on them
Uh-huh.
and altering them that way. So
Well,
yeah,
recently, the past week or so, I've been having them create collages, and so
uh,
and some with text, and
yeah,
you showing us that they understand the difficulty in getting a composition that works.
yeah. And then keeping everything in the right position whilst you go try and glue it as well is quite
Right,
hard.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think I'm really enjoying collaging as well. But it's all kind of the same, still using old photos and
Hmm.
yeah, I really enjoy it. But again, I mainly do it on weekends and evenings and try and fit as much of it in at break time, at lunch, afternoon break. Um, that's usually what I'm doing.
You froze on us, Olivia. Are you there?
Oh,
Oh, now you're back.
you're back. You're back. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, feel free to ask. If not, I'll move on to the puppet side of things, and then we can come back to it as well.
Yeah. Why don't we? Let's let. I want to get to puppets, and then at the end we can come back and ask questions of
Yeah,
everything, or while the puppets are going. All right.
that's fine. Okay. So, um, as a quick recap of how I got to puppets and why I love them so much, I thought I'd do past high school. So I knew I really enjoyed art and I knew I really wanted to do something creative at university and as a career. So I was lucky enough to have a really supportive art teacher, and he suggested, I really loved English and art, and he suggested to look into theatre design. So um, that made a lot of sense. So I applied to the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in Cardiff, Wales, um, and I got in. And when I got in, I realised that we weren't just going to be doing theatre design, which is very conceptual, a lot of reading, analysing. Um, uh, I realised that we're going to do a lot of making as well, and learn how to put on a production from start to finish. So we got taught, like, top left is a fake door, so it's all made out of polystyrene, which is carved and painted. Um, the giant tomato soup robot is also all made out of polystyrene. The burger on the bottom left, again, all carved polystyrene and painted. The snail is made from newspaper, cardboard, and recycled, like, advertisement posters. And then we also learned how to do scenic painting and recreating paintings and making large scale paintings. So it was really creative, and I think because the course was so creative, I felt really fulfilled, and I knew I'd made the right choice. In my first year, you might have seen a lot of these photos because they're all from my website. But before going to uni, I didn't know puppetry was really a career choice or a path. I grew up in Italy, and we didn't have any of the shows like Warhorse that the UK had. We only had Pinocchio, which was a marionette. And in my first year, we did a project that was solely puppetry. So we designed, made, and puppeteered the puppets for a script that had been written for us. So that was kind of like when I realized that I really wanted to make puppets. And then in my second year, I applied to do it again as a team leader, and we made that giant skeleton rat puppet. And again, we got to perform as well. And I think that's the beauty of puppetry, is that you can design, make, and then you can perform. So it feels like you follow the entire process through, which I really enjoy. And then in my third year, I specialized. So I made my own puppet. And so I knitted the gloves, the socks, I made the dungarees. So the other positive thing about puppetry is a puppet can be whatever you want it. So whatever skills you want to include, that's fine. So you can make a fabric one, you can make it solely out of wood, it can be recycled plastic, it can be any method you want. And yeah, that's really cool. I'm just skipping through them quickly just to show like the variety of puppets that I made before going on to His Dark Materials. This one again, Giant Frog, we made for a celebration of Roald Dahl's birthday. The mouth opened, the tongue kind of rolled out, and this tiny fly was at the end of it. And this here made me realize how much I love puppeteering and seeing people's reactions. So I was hidden inside the frog. So if you imagine my head was just behind the frog's eyes, so from inside the mouth, I had a view of all of the kids underneath. And the reactions we had from that were just amazing. We had a few kids cry as well because they were scared, but most of it was positive. And the year after I graduated, so I graduated in 2017. In 2018, I think it was all very lucky. His Dark Materials started filming in Cardiff, where I'd studied, and they were starting to crew up, so they needed people to work on it. And I think I graduated at the right time because they were looking for a trainee, like an apprentice. So I had experience in the industry, really. I'd only done theatre and I'd only been at uni. So I was kind of the perfect level to be a trainee. So I'm really glad about that. I think if I'd been in the industry for years, I would have been too experienced and I would have missed out on the opportunity. So that was quite good. And then I was on it for, I think, 4 years, and it's brought a lot of other jobs my way. So I'm very happy. Do you guys know the story behind it? Or do you know about His Dark Materials at all?
No, we do not.
Okay, fine. So I'll give a quick overview.
No. Okay.
So His Dark Materials is a book written by Philip Pullman. It's based in the UK, in Oxford, but in a different world. So in this world, every single human has what they call a demon. So a demon is their soul represented outside of the body through an animal. So if you imagine you can talk to your soul, that's what they are. But rather than being another person, they all look like animals. And the idea behind it is that until you hit puberty, this animal can change into whatever animal you want, or whatever animal it feels like being. So if you're feeling quite shy, it might turn into like a little mouse. If you're feeling quite outgoing, it'll maybe become a tiger. If you've gone to the beach and going swimming, it might turn into like an Arctic tern or a dolphin. So it can shapeshift however much it wants. And then as soon as you hit puberty, the animal sticks to one form. So depending on where you live, what your lifestyle is, if you're in the city, in the countryside, it'll kind of stick to a form. So the whole premise behind it is that these animals need to be emotionally attached to the actors. So generally, when they're filming with visual effects or CG elements, the actors have very limited things to look at. So on the left there, Life of Pi, they're already on a blue or a green screen. So already their environment is unreal. It's not where they're technically supposed to be. It's all very fake, and it's already a lot of work for the actor to imagine like their surroundings. And often, if the creature they're kind of like interacting with is going to be CG, they don't have anything there to look at, or maybe they've got like a tennis ball on a stick to suggest the eye line. So it's a lot of work for the actors to imagine everything. The same with the two photos on the right. You might have something called like a buck, and that's generally only the shape or the weight of the animal, which can be helpful so that you know where to put your hands, but emotionally and for the acting side of things, it doesn't help at all. So the director, the first director we had on season 1, he was adamant that he wanted the actors to build a relationship with the demons, these souls. So he was trying to find a way of like taking that connection to a new level, which is where we came in. So our main job, or what it started off as, was to provide a physical representation of the animals that would then be drawn up in CG later. So practically, we were there for scale. So it's really hard when you tell someone on set a polar bear won't fit through that door. People will say, "Oh, I'm sure it will. Like, I have a feeling it's this wide, and we'll just make it fit." The difference was we would actually have a real life polar bear, like a scale reference of a polar bear on set, and literally wheel it through the door and show them the polar bear won't fit through the door. So we were there for purely practical sense to show scale. And so in theory, the things didn't really have to look like animals and just be the shape, but because of the emotional interaction as well, we decided to give the animals character as well. So that's when these puppets, like this one here on the right, come in. So we had sculpted faces, we'd paint them, and already that brings them to life. They're all very, very simple puppets, but for some reason, the second you start puppeteering with them, everyone starts looking at them. People forget that the puppeteer's there, and they really interact and they really enjoy the puppet's presence. I think I'll show video because it's much easier to tell
Okay.
in that form.
Is there?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, is there at the end of shooting? Is there a struggle between the puppeteer and the actor who gets to take the puppet home?
Well, I feel like generally the actors win on that front. They tend to get what they want. No, but with these ones specifically, we actually managed to the production company Bad Wolf managed to keep all of them. We did make a couple of replicas that went out. So Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's got a little head of the hair.
Yeah.
And Ruth Wilson, who plays Mrs. Coulter, she's got the golden monkey head, who was her demon. So we made replicas. They were very happy. Can you see my desktop, or do I need to reshare differently?
No, we're still on the slide.
Okay. Let me change it then. Do it this way. Ah, won't let me. That's weird.
So we found what's not good about Jitsi.
I mean, entire screen. Oh, okay.
Hey!
The button wasn't working earlier. Okay.
Desktop.
So, yes. I will go through. I'll show you the main creature effects reel. So creature effects was what our team was called. And that will show quite a lot of before and after, and the difference between a blank space, a puppet being there, and then the CG version. So I think that explains it quite well, and it shows quite clearly the difference between the onset and the visual effects, and also it's hard to tell, but like the impact the puppets actually made. And so we thought when we started, we'd really appeal to the kids. So it's a very kid heavy show. There are lots and lots of really young kids during season 1, and we thought the puppets would kind of benefit them the most, because it's a lot harder for them to imagine something that isn't there. So the puppets would kind of be that thing, but it actually turned out that the kids, they enjoyed them, but they found them more silly than anything.
Yeah. You froze on it.
Like they were. Oh yeah. So yeah, we. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So yeah, the kids were the ones kind of making fun of the puppets more than the adults, which felt really weird. We thought it would be the opposite, because puppets are generally seen as like child play,
Yeah.
or for children, but the actors, the adults, really connected with them and really took them as like a tool to help them and improve the post-production, which was really nice to see. And yeah, they just made the most of them rather than kind of trying to ignore them and not move forward, let's say.
Well, we've got a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering that if you're the person controlling the puppet, do you have to like learn how each animal moves and stuff, and like the way like they talk? Because I was wondering if you're like a cheetah and you have to run super fast, is the person running like a cheetah, or they just do like editing to that?
Yeah, it's a fine balance. So we build all the puppets anatomically correct. So they all have the limbs and the hinges and the joints in the right place. So that helps with the movement. And we make sure that we lock them into place as well. So I've got one of the puppets here. So quite close. So for example, this one here, this is the front leg. We make sure that if we put a hinge at the elbow, for example, it stops where the actual animal's limb would stop, so that there's no risk of it like squishing too far or it locking the opposite way. So here, it can't straighten more than that, and it can't go past breaking point. So all of that helps with the movement. But we do also watch a lot of videos on YouTube on how animals move, and not only how they move, we also look at like skeletal moves as well, and the musculature of them. And then the hard thing with these is they all look like animals, but we also needed to keep remembering that they're technically very human as well. So there was kind of like, they didn't go to the toilet. So a lot of the actors would say, oh, but where do they wee and where do they poo? And it's kind of like, no, they don't do any of that, because they look like animals, but they're not very animal-like, and they don't need to eat, and they have very human mannerisms as well. So that all comes into play. And then in any occasions where they needed to run, for example, we would take all the legs off. So the limbs are mainly there to show kind of the shape and the rough outline and help with the walking. But when it came to actual fast movements, we were only allowed one puppeteer per puppet. because we didn't want to crowd the set. So already having to deal with 4 limbs, 1 person is really, really hard. So whenever we needed to run, we would just take all the legs off, and they were kind of like floating bodies and heads. And we would just, they would roughly tell us, you need to go from A to B in a couple of seconds, and we just like go for it. But in that case, it's not about the movement, it's about aiding the camera movement. So showing the camera how fast it needs to go from A to B if it's following us. So it's, we weren't only there for the actors, we were also there for the camera and the director to be able to frame up. And if they were doing a scene with a really big polar bear, for example, and we could tell from the framing the polar bear isn't going to fit in there, we'd be able to tell them, you need to widen a bit, because you're cutting off the bear at the ear, and that would look weird. So we helped with all of that as well. And equally, I've got a good video that would show this one. The bear walking.
Olivia, we've got maybe 8 minutes left.
Okay, let me share this other one.
I'd like to go all day because this is.
I'll show this one, and then if you've got any questions. So I'm on full screen. So this one here, it looks ridiculous, but it's a really good example of how we helped camera move along the shot and frame up and help them know how quickly a bear would walk up the street. So that was a lot of what we did. I don't know if we want to do questions now, or if I quickly show another video of, so we didn't only do animals, we also did what we call windows through worlds. So I'll show you the video quickly and then explain. So one of the main characters had a knife that could cut through different dimensions, and the actor was needing something to work with, so a physical representation of what these windows were. So we'd go in with a wire and a string so that he could, so this is a good view. There's a wire window, and he'd be able to step through something that existed. Makes it a lot easier. And then, so that there is a fishing line, and he'd use the knife against the fishing line, so he would put it in exactly the same spot every single time we shot. So that was another element of the job. And yeah, basically just to show that it wasn't just puppets. There was like a range of stuff we did, and it all kind of used creativity, and it was just kind of adapting and understanding what the requirements were and how we could aid the filming process.
Yeah. Pierce, did you want to go?
Is animal puppetry your favorite type to make or work with? And is that why you do movies or shows that have animal characters?
It's really hard. Yes, I do really love animal puppets. I think, ironically, I love them because they don't speak. So when I specifically puppeteer, I'm not a fan of performing with my voice. I much prefer movement. But the funny thing on this one is they all talked. They were all humanized. So that didn't really work. But I tried to get over my fear of talking. But yeah, I do really love animals, I think, because you can. It just feels very different than making a human puppet. I think it's a lot easier for people to judge a human puppet than it is an animal one. And it just feels like you have a lot more option when it comes to the making and what they look like, because you can kind of make them up as you go along, really.
Did you? There you go.
I had another question. I was wondering if, because I've never really seen any TV shows use like a lot of puppets. So is your TV show like one of the first ones to ever do stuff like this?
Yeah, so the majority of, or all shows or films that use CGI have never actually used puppets before. So they put tennis balls on sticks to represent kind of heads and eyes. But yeah, we were the first kind of department that developed this style specifically for the requirements of the show. So because the actors needed such an emotional connection to the CG elements, they kind of backtracked and said, how can we make that happen during filming? And they thought puppets would be the best option. And from this, it's meant that shows like Fantastic Beasts, the Harry Potter prequels, they've also started using this. So they've started making actual puppets to use on set. So it's definitely become more popular, and we're working on a documentary right now which is purely CG animals. And even then, they've decided we need to make puppets for it so that the crew can see them. Sorry. So that the crew can see it and the crew can kind of frame up correct sizes. So it's moving forward, and we've just set up a company called Practic Creations that is specialized in kind of practical effects and puppetry for film and TV. So yeah, it's been very successful, luckily.
Okay.
I really like your puppeteering, but I think that I'm really like interested in your sewing, like on your pictures and things like that. Going back to your sewing, I was wondering. I know you have like favorite shops and stuff to go get like different old time photos from. I know you said thrifting and antique stores and stuff, but
Yeah.
when you were like sewing, and I know you said that you create stories for the pictures while you sew. Do you have
Yeah.
like a favorite story that you've created to a piece? Or
That's really hard. So, just a quick look. I think I really like almost putting down thoughts on photos. So even though I really like all of the like abstract imagery and like all of the shapes and stuff, I quite enjoy like text on photos, because it feels like, I know it's a much more literal way of creating like a new story, but I just enjoy almost imagining what people have going on and like showing it on the outside. So for example, I'll read it out, but this one here has got text running along the silhouette of the woman, and it says, "You still live in the gaps between my thoughts." So, yeah, I guess even though it's very literal, I quite enjoy that it's a very clear storyline, and I've kind of imposed it on her. So this is probably not what she was thinking, but I've kind of said, "Yes, this is happening."
And that was our bell. Olivia, thank you. Thank you very, very much. This was generous and exciting, and I find it very interesting that you went into the theater program not knowing you could make a career out of puppetry, and it blossomed. Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah. So, hey, can y'all get on each side? May I take a picture? Yeah. So they're gonna get along. They're gonna get next. Yeah. And then I'll post this, and Okay, 1, 2. Oh, lovely people. Okay. Olivia, it's a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to seeing more what you do, and I am definitely going to start watching this this show, and I want to hear what else happens. So
Cool.
thank
So
you.
I felt I was a bit rushed, but I hope it all made
Oh
sense.
gosh, not at all. I was fascinated. It's great. Okay, appreciate it. I'll be in touch. I'll send you the video.
Yeah, it's nice
Okay.
meeting you.
Likewise. Bye bye.
Bye.